Welcome back to Senior Savvy Cannabis. I'm Catherine Goldberg. Today we're joined by Chase Werner from Triangle Seeds. You guys know Chase by now. He is our growing expert. He's walking me through this entire endeavor of how to grow weed well. We have talked about indoor versus outdoor. We talked about the sun versus LEDs. We talked about tents versus grow rooms. And now we need to have a conversation about growing media and fertilizer. What are my options, and why would I interviewed a no-till company, and I saw their living soil, and they had these really cute worms in it, and it seemed like a really great ecosystem. So why would someone do no-till versus like hydro or aeroponic?
It's a great question. First, just a definition on the growing media for people that don't know that term. Media just refers to whatever the roots are growing in. So a grow media could be living soil, potting soil, or a grow media at the other end of the spectrum could just be fertilized water that the roots are being sprayed with in like an aeroponic system. So that's the term. When we talk about media, could be soil, could be peat moss, could be fertilized water.
Is that coco?
Coco is a type of growing media.
Okay.
Rock wool is a growing media.
Does that change? Like, then why do so many commercial grows not do living soil?
Living soil doesn't lend itself to commercial production. Hydroponics is an exact science by necessity. Soil kind of gives you, literally it's called buffering capacity, which is basically forgiveness in terms of fertilizer. With hydroponics, the margin for error is smaller, but the yields can be bigger. The growth rate can be faster. Also in hydroponics, it's very efficient from a resource use standpoint. You know, this is debated in the forums, as most things are in the cannabis grow world. But generally speaking, hydroponics is good for the environment because it uses a fraction of the water, fraction of the space that conventional agriculture uses. So, yeah, kind of got on a tangent there, but.
Is living soil more of a beginner friendly?
Sure, so living soil, why would someone choose living soil?
Yeah,
basically.
Because you asked me how I wanted to grow.
Yep.
And I automatically said living soil because I want it to be organic. I want it to be as natural as possible.
Yeah, sure.
But not everyone wants to grow in living soil.
Yeah, generally speaking, you're on the organic side of things, you're growing for flavor and like terpene production. On the hydroponic side, you're growing more for yield.
Interesting.
And I don't even want to say cannabinoid strength because you can produce high cannabinoid values in both methods of growing. Hydroponic is something you have to dial. You're dialing in. It's almost like the personality of a pure hydroponic grower is someone who's really detail oriented and wants to take a scientific approach to it. You know, you can grow great bud with either method. Organics is a little bit more, it's organic gardening. You know, it's organic farming at a larger scale. You know, a lot of people grow organically because of a philosophical viewpoint, which is, you know, I support wholeheartedly. Generally, in my cultivation businesses, I was doing hydroponic produce to start commercially. And then I did soilless mix with cannabis, which is like a hybrid hydroponic approach. Just because in a commercial setting, you know, we're growing for flower, we're growing for seed. It lends itself to that. But for like a hobby grow, like for my own hobby grows, you know, I would go organic.
Okay.
For flavor.
When I originally considered growing and asked a bunch of people what I needed to get started, a lot of them said Fox Farm.
Sure.
I used Fox Farm the first time I grew. It didn't seem super natural. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
But it seems like there are people who like make their own soil do people like nerd out on
It's hardcore. Making your own soil is like next level.
Okay.
Nerding out. You know, Fox Farm, I started when I was in the hydroponic like retail industry. I was selling Fox Farm Ocean Forest in 2008. That's when I started working in those stores. And so like Fox Farm has been around for a long time. They've got organic products. I'm sure, almost positive, they still have some salt-based products.
Okay.
And that's something to talk about. It's like fertilizer generally is either organic or salt-based.
Okay.
We can get into that, but Fox Farm has both.
Why would someone?
Good company, for sure.
Okay.
In general, yeah. I think Fox Farm makes good stuff.
Great.
And it's natural. It's building your own soil is a hassle.
Okay.
You know, I'm not take the air quotes away.
Yeah.
Building your own soil is a hassle. You've got to buy bulk peat, bulk coco, bulk perlite. It's very dusty. Starting out, I would just buy bagged. There's plenty of good bagged soils out there.
Okay. Do you know what kind of bag soil we're going to start with?
So what we're going to do is it's going to be a peat-based mix.
What is peat?
Peat moss.
Okay.
That's probably the most popular growing media in the world.
Okay.
It's harvested from peat bogs. A bog is, like a very wet place out in the country.
There's a reason Chase is here.
So peat, it's the OG, a bog. That's where peat is harvested from.
Okay.
It's not as sustainable as like coconut coir. That's another media. It's kind of, you can use peat or you can use coco. Coco is literally made from the husk of coconuts. It's
Wow.
It's arguably more sustainable, but it can hold on to salts. Peat and perlite's good. Perlite is like an expanded rock. It's a rock that's heated up really hot and it puts air into the rock. And so you'll get a huge bag of perlite will weigh 5 pounds, or less, because it's mostly air.
Interesting.
It's to provide aeration in the soil. What you don't want in soil is an anaerobic environment, an environment without air.
Okay.
You get nasty bacteria. So peat. So what we're going to start with, we're going to be using like a peat and perlite mix.
Okay.
And then we're going to use a product called Nature's Living Soil.
Okay.
They have a concentrate super soil. And super soil has been around probably since the late 90s or early 2000s. The first time I heard of it was a guy named Subcool. Subcool super soil was all over back in the day. But it's basically a concentrated buffet of organic soil amendments.
Does that mean it includes the fertilizers or
Yes,
not necessarily?
Exactly. It's a buffet of organic fertilizers.
Okay.
So the ideal in a super soil situation is you only have to water. We're going to shoot for a water only, as opposed to like mixing fertilizer and when we water.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
We're going to shoot for water only. We may not be able to stick to that.
Okay.
In order to get the best flower.
Sure.
But that's generally what the goal of the super soil was to just make it simple and just put all the organic fertilizer sources that the plant would need in the soil, and then just add water.
Okay. Instead of mix, because then you have to get those big bottles of the fertilizer, and then you mix it in with water, and then.
Yeah. So So on the fertilizer side, there's organic, and then there's salt based.
Okay.
And so I want to start this discussion by saying that the molecule of nitrogen or calcium that the plant absorbs through its roots is chemically identical, whether it comes from a salt-based fertilizer or an organic fertilizer.
Okay.
Chemically identical.
Okay.
What is different about it is in a salt-based fertilizer, basically that molecule of nitrogen, for example, which would be like ammonia or nitrate, is going to be attached to a salt.
Okay.
Literally mined from the earth. And then the salt molecule is separated from the nitrate, and that nitrate goes through the root. In an organic system, that nitrate molecule will be in part of like an amendment, like something like bone or blood meal, some kind of natural product. And there's microbes in the soil that essentially convert that nitrate that's attached to the organic into the pure nitrate form that can be uptaken by the root system. Is that, so I know it's kind of a lot. I'm looking at her face. I went a little deep. Yeah, ask me questions if you got them.
I have questions.
Yep.
Okay, so, one question is I hear about people, and I don't know if this is accurate, but that they judge their flower based on the color of the ash. And if it's like white ash, it's okay, but if it's like not white ash, it tells you something about like the fertilizers that were used, or
I haven't seen any like hard science around it.
Totally, okay. Might just be mythology.
Yeah, there's a phrase in the cannabis industry called like bro science, which is...
Fucking hate that phrase.
Yeah, which is a little bit of, it's what it is. It's not really science. It's a bunch of people talking about stuff they've seen in a room.
Are there any downsides? So why would someone not use organic? Is it cheaper?
Well, real quick on the ash thing.
Sorry, yeah.
So just to put a pin in it, I don't really have any like definitive comment white ash, black ash on fertilizer.
And we're also vaping. So like
that's correct.
We don't, not relevant for us.
Yeah, right. So, so why would someone use organic or salt-based, basically? So organic could be like the philosophical approach of like, why would someone want to do organic gardening? It's, they're natural products, right? The salt, the thing is on the salt base, that's also like a natural product because salts come from the earth. But with salts, they can accumulate in the soil, and it's those microbes I talked about in the living soil are gonna, if you have too many salts in your soil, it's gonna kill the microbes. And so basically, here's a way to put it. With living soil, you're feeding the soil. And you're kind of taking pride in creating that soil food web for the plant to exist in. With salt-based, you're really just feeding the plant. And the media, the rock wool or the peat moss or whatever it is just a delivery system for the plant, for the nutrients to the plant. So they both have pros and cons. If one, if kind of the sciencey, efficient side of things sounds interesting to you, then you might want to explore salt-based. If you are interested in recreating soil biology, and again, going for more flavor. You can't, flavor and yield together, hard to do. You really have to pick which is your priority.
That's fascinating.
And so if your priority is flavor over yield, go towards organic. If your priority is yield over flavor, go towards hydro. That's a pretty good way to sum it up.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You should cut that. That's great.
Cut it.
That's it. Okay. There's no danger in using the salt-based ones, are there?
No danger.
Okay.
No, I mean, you can make an environmental argument for what you do with the runoff.
Okay.
Because when that salt is detached, like at some point, are you dumping your water, into your kitchen drain? Okay, you're putting salts into the ecosystem or whatnot. If you have dumping runoff is not as important in an organic system, but also if you have other potted plants, you can just dump your runoff into your tomatoes or your lettuce or anything, or your garden or your grass. It's organic. Don't panic. It's organic.
Okay, so we have decided, even though I'm growing in a tent, that we're going to use organic soil.
Yes.
We're using a hybrid approach. Is that correct?
We're going to go pretty close, I think, to the extreme side of living soil. Something that needs to be said is living soil, when it's cooking, when it first is put into the container and the microbial activity is coming to life, it stinks. It smells like rotting compost. Okay. It subsides, but it generally has an earthy smell. I mean, you're using products like kelp meal, which are seaweed, and fish emulsion, which is processed fish. And so there's a smell factor to it. We're going to navigate that by letting our container cook on your balcony, protected from the rain, and then bring it inside. And obviously in the tent, you have a carbon filter, which will scrub the odor. But there's something to be said for that. If that smell that kind of beginning kind of pungent organic composty smell is tough for you, then you may want to lean towards the cleaner side of things, which would be like a hydro. And then, like you said, there is a hybrid approach. I think we're going to push towards the organic side, but in between living soil with worms in it, right, that you no-till and you leave forever. And then the other extreme, which is like specifically an aeroponic hydroponic system, which is just, there's literally a true aeroponic system. There's no physical media. There's just roots hanging in an enclosed tank with misters shooting water that's fertilized.
Wow.
It's the fastest. It's like the Ferrari of growing systems. Like if you can control your environment, you will never see a plant grow faster than with an aeroponic salt-based system. So it's fascinating. That's why I fell in love with hydroponics. That's where I started. But there's a whole range between those two extremes. And so you can choose to do peat moss and perlite and some organic fertilizer with some light salt fertilizer for quicker uptake. Salt-based nitrogen, plant's gonna absorb it super quick.
Okay.
So based on your desire for flavor or yield, and based on your tolerance of smelling a little bit like compost early on and kind of dealing with some stinky stuff, frankly, you want to make that call on where you want to land on the hybrid approach.
And I'll take the smell. I think that's worth it. I like to get my hands dirty. Yeah, we'll do it the right way.
I mean, it's really cool. It's like what we're going to essentially be doing is we're going to build a mini raised bed in your grow tent. This is raised bed gardening in your living room.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What size pot are we using? And are we using a fabric pot? Or are we going to use, can you say more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So because we're going to go the living soil route, we need to have a bigger pot because with microbial activity, you need a certain amount of soil volume you need a big enough kind of factory. With salt-based fertilizer, you can have a little tiny rock wool cube, and as long as you can irrigate on an automatic schedule, you can grow a really big plant. So we're going to be leaning towards like a 7-gallon container, considering up to a 15 if we want to go really extreme, full on living soil. But I'd say, and then in terms of a fabric pot, I'm considering the fabric pot for us, but I'm also curious to use a product called an EarthBox. I've sold EarthBoxes back in the day. They're basically a self-watering container.
Nice.
And so I think that would have some advantages for you in terms of ease of watering. You just water from the bottom. But yeah, so we haven't made a call yet, but somewhere in between, possibly an EarthBox, if not an EarthBox, then certainly a fabric pot.
Okay.
Fabric pots are great. I would always suggest someone use a fabric pot. It prevents as opposed to like a plastic pot or a terracotta pot or any kind of firm wall pot. Basically, when you have that fabric, what's happening is the root is hitting that wall, and instead of circling like it would in a normal pot, it branches, it senses the air and it branches out back into the soil matter. Oh. So it prevents like what we call like root girdling, which is like if you ever pulled out a plant from the nursery and it's got roots all the way wrapped around it, it's root bound, which you don't want. The plant's gonna be stressed out, and so you just get really good root development in the middle of the pot, the fabric pot.
Wow.
And the fabric pot that I would use is from a company called Rootmaker.
Okay.
We used to use them for like when we had a cloning operation with mother plants. They're fantastic. They have white fabric on the outside to keep the pot cool. They're like a small company, I think, in Virginia.
Awesome.
But yeah, so Rootmaker
we'll link to them.
or EarthBox, we're
still deciding.
Yeah, still deciding, but both good products.
Fantastic. Yeah. Is there anything else I need to know about fertilizer, about growing media, or have we sort of decided what direction we're going in?
We've decided the general world we're going to live in, which is a living soil. I'm not prepared to say we're going to do no-till. With this grow, we just want to see how it goes in your situation here. But yeah, we're essentially going to go for a living soil using the nature's living concentrate.
Okay.
And, you know, what's really common is if you go to like a grow shop is liquid fertilizer, like pre-bottled, bottled nutrients.
Right.
What the industry calls them. And those are, without a doubt, their biggest positive is convenience. They're in a bottle, you add 2 milliliters of this in week 2, and they have a feed chart for you, and it makes it easy. But they're, you know, you pay a premium for that convenience. They're expensive, and some companies, you know, there's 12 bottles, and you buy one product that costs $90, and you use a teaspoon in week 6. And so there's a little bit of, you know, I caution people to go straight to a liquid nutrient with 12 bottles. It's just a little bit overkill. I think, as I was off camera speaking with you, it's like for me, the ethos of growing is like how few products and inputs can we use, and how little energy and few products can we use to grow, to be successful in the grow. And what that means to everyone's different, but you know, to grow a tasty smokable flower, generally less, you know, the less products we have to use, the better, which means that the products that we do use are absolutely necessary to be successful.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the general ethos for me.
And I appreciate that because I see how it can be easy kind of to nerd out on all the coolest, newest gadgets out there.
Yeah, and I'm a gear gadget person.
Totally.
I collect.
But when you're just starting out, if you want to be conscious of the costs, you know, there's a small, you have to pay a bit to get it set up and set up running, but we don't have to go overboard.
Yeah, and another thing I'll say this is something to tack onto this conversation, I think, is automation versus manual. Automation, you know, is kind of seen as like the ultimate. But the thing is with automation is that you get lazy and you miss stuff. And so like an old North Carolina saying is the best fertilizer is a farmer's shadow. You're in the field, you're in the rows, like that's how you grow good plants. And so if you automate and you go away for a week, things can get out of hand. And so in terms of the environment, humidity, temperature, absolutely, we're going to automate the crap out of that. But in terms of like watering and some of the plant work, we're going to keep manual so that you learn and that we don't let things slip up.
Good.
So.
Last question.
Sure.
When I water the plant, do I take water from this? Do I use Brita water?
So with water is very important.
Right.
You know, it's in any grow. And so what I always suggest and what we're going to do is send off your tap water, call it your source water. We're going to use tap.
Sure.
We're going to send that off to a state lab.
Okay.
It's like $9 or $10.
Really? Cool.
Yep. And they'll give you a report.
Wow.
State agricultural lab. Every state, you know, you should look up like in your state extension services.
Okay.
Extension is kind of like a quasi-governmental arm of agricultural departments and colleges, ag colleges in states, where it's basically people that are there to help the public in the pursuit of horticulture or gardening or ag. So kind of check out extension, and if you go to your state's extension sites or you Google agricultural water testing, you should find in pretty much every state some very inexpensive $10 to $20 service where we'll send off, you know, a couple water bottles of tap, and they'll send us back calcium carbonate, pH, fluoride, chlorine concentrations and stuff like that. And so that's the first step with the water is you get it tested and you see what it is, and then you make decisions based on that test.
Okay.
And then a lot of people will jump, since you brought up water, a lot of people will jump to reverse osmosis.
Right.
Which is basically like zero, it's just water. It's just H2O. It's 0 ppm, parts per million. There's nothing in it. And that's obviously like a blank canvas. But then you actually have to remineralize your water. If you want to have a complete, you either have to remineralize the water or you have to account for the water having nothing in it on your fertilizer side. And RO filters are expensive, and a lot of them have a 1-to-1 waste ratio. So to make a gallon of RO, you have to dump a gallon of water, which is inefficient. So don't run out and buy RO. Don't do that immediately. First, get your water tested. And I think once we get those water tests back, we'll probably do a segment.
Absolutely.
Look at your water test and just kind of you just have to, I take a scientific approach to growing, try to make it accessible for people, but there's certain fundamentals that you have to do if you want to ensure success. And the water test is something that a lot of people skip. We're not going to skip it.
And it's low cost, and we
Yeah.
get cool data.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I love how much is going into this before we even have a seed.
That's right, and that's intentional. I have not brought the seed over.
Yeah, we have amazing.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, because I think people get excited to see that they can purchase seeds so easily,
Yep.
and then they want to, they throw them in the paper towel.
Before the tent is even there.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen, yep.
And then they're kind of screwed.
Yeah, they're just kind of like, they're behind the 8 ball, so to speak, right? So I would encourage people not to rush and germinate that seed, because once you put that seed in moisture, you start a clock.
Right.
And then you're kind of like, you're on it. And if you don't do the steps as you need to do once the seed is germinated, your plant's going to suffer. And so take the time to think about what part of your house you're going to grow in, what kind of system you're going to grow in, what tent you want to buy, and where you want to put it. And then also, like we talked about in other videos, what's your lung room? What's the environment doing? Like we've run your tent now with the light turned on 100%, the extraction fan on 100% with the sensor inside to see what your lung room creates temperature, humidity wise in the grow tent.
Right.
So we're probably looking at 2 to 3 weeks between when we built your tent and when we're actually going to start the seed.
And that's the right way to do it.
It is.
I think
Yeah.
if we can get that message out there to people, they'll have a lot more success and
Yes.
probably appreciate the process a bit more too.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Awesome. Well, those were all my questions.
Okay.
I'm sure you guys have questions. So many questions. Put them in the comments. Chase will answer. And we'll get going. I'm ready to get my hands dirty.
Cool.